Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. We are going to be reacting to a clip from an interview I missed back in February because I went to Boston. I didn't know Alex Karp did this interview in February, but it came out in February and I just found it on YouTube the other day and I said, you know what? I got to do a reaction to this of Karp talking about Palantir's ethics and values and how they implicated Palantir as a company itself. I think he dropped some real gems in here, so I want to react to it. It's about 5 minutes and let's go through it now.
This conference is responsible AI, so I'd like to get on to kind of ethics and values, which you have mentioned. I mean, I guess to massively oversimplify, in America, particularly after 9/11, there was a theory that the ends justify the means, that the national security
Not our
everything.
theory.
I know.
Karp is quick there to correct the journalist, even though the journalist knew what he was doing here. But he said, the ends justifying the means means that you can do whatever you want as long as it justifies the end result, right? I can kill 1,000 people as long as I save 2,000 people. Karp's entire philosophy is actually, no, you have to have a utilitarian ethic without destroying stuff in the process of getting there. And he's going to talk more about that in this clip.
We'll come to that. In Europe, I think there's clearly an argument that individual rights are, in some respects, more important than national security. So which is the bigger problem, big terror or big brother? So can you reconcile these two?
Big terror or big brother? The divide here is either to fight big terror, which is a bad thing for the collective society. You need to become big brother, right? You need to become this all-intrusive spy government to stop people from doing bad things. Or do you care more about people's individual civil liberties, which means even if big terror happens, you don't become big brother in the meantime to be able to stop big terror. It's a really unique philosophical divide that exists in society, and Palantir had a unique approach to being able to solve that issue.
It's always interesting to tell people things that they don't believe, probably justifiably will never believe, but are true. A lot of the reason why my company succeeded was, in the beginning, post 9/11, everyone was like, oh, find terrorists, we don't care how. Most of our investors were like, find terrorists, we don't care how. And you make lots of mistakes when you do things, and I may have made a lot of mistakes. One of the best decisions I ever made was reflecting upon Hegel. We can have a dialectic.
For those that don't know what a dialectic is, it is the art of investigating or discussing the truth of opinions. Hegel was a philosopher, and a Hegelian dialectic is simply an understanding that there are more components to something that is not absolute, meaning there can be an and versus an or when you're discussing the very essence of how you come to the truth, how you come to an epistemological understanding, which is just the study of truth, towards an idea. And so what Karp is saying is that we can have a dialectic, we can have an understanding of multiple different viewpoints and come to conclusions and build a philosophy or a technology based on those multiple viewpoints versus having an absolutist view that we only have to do one or the other.
We're going to find terrorists and protect data protection. And why is that important? And by the way, we hadn't even bothered selling our product to Europe, which is, you may not know it, but almost every European country in some form or another uses our CT product, counterterrorism product. And why do they use it? Because if you just find the terrorist and you abandon civil liberties, you lose half the society. In my view, correctly. Do you want everyone knowing what you do in your personal life? I don't. And I think it's our God-given right to have parts of our personal lives that are protected. You can't, but if you don't find the terrorists, and this is where I disagree with a lot of my academic friends, you're going to have goose-stepping in the streets. And I got yelled at all over the world for saying our product, Palantir, has played an enormous role in Europe in stopping the far right. There's all these conspiracy theories, not because we're in any way involved in targeting the far right, but because if you protect data and stop terrorism, you get mainstream parties. If you don't protect the terrorism, you get far right people. So you have to do both.
What he's talking about here is a dichotomy between how you help a population. If you hurt people, for example, if you stop a terrorist attack, but you have to invade people's civil liberties in order to be able to do that, you get more far right-wing nationalism because people feel as if the government is invading their ideas, their thoughts, their way of life, and as a result, you get more people shifting to a populist revolt. So you need to be able to stop bad things from happening while being able to protect civil liberties, because if you do one or the other, either A, you protect liberties to such a degree that you don't stop the bad things from happening, which means you have more terrorism, which creates more terrorism, or you stop terrorism without protecting liberties, which means now people feel violated, and as a result, they revolt against the government. So you need to have a unique balance between both, and what Karp is saying about their counterterrorism product being used in multiple countries all throughout Europe is true. I mean, there have been numerous reports I've seen about countries in Europe, specifically 2014 to 2016, being able to use that product to be able to fend off the rise of right-wing terrorism. And That's an important thing, but you need to be able to protect civil liberties while you're in the process of trying to solve that issue, which is just, it's one of those things that companies don't have the ability to do unless you build your technology with the ability to do that.
Now, getting to the ethics, and what we found, by the way, is in doing both, you end up with something better because, in fact, you only need access to the data that you have access to, and you can do an incredible amount on that data. Now you get to the AI context where it is a winner-take-all thing. And you have, again, the debate. Well, we should just throw out our ethics. Of course, our adversaries have, by Western standards, they do have ethics. They just have ethics that are very different than ours. And those ethics do not include segmenting data so that you can see how the decision making was done, doing before and after action reports so you can decide what can be targeted, deciding what drives what areas AI can be involved in and what areas they can't be. And I would tell you the same thing that sounds academic but has made my company very successful. When you actually reach for the higher standard, you end up with a much more powerful system and you bring everybody in the society with you. Whereas if you just say we're going to throw out ethics, first of all, even if you wanted to, that is not implementable in any country in this room. It's not implementable, by the way, in America. It's like there's a slight myth that in America it's like we're cowboys. We're like, yeah, we just run. And it is true. We're more ready for action than, say, some other countries. But you do have very strong codes of ethics about what you're allowed to do, what can be targeted, what are the actions, what happens if something went wrong, who's responsible. You know, in every Western society, you have a chain of authority that goes from civilian to military. There has to be an ability to map that chain onto digitized targeting.
So how do we do that?
You need, and this is where you need an architecture. It takes 5-6 years to build, which allows you to segment the data and allows you to expose parts. First of all, AI doesn't work in private networks as well as it does in consumer, for very simple technical reasons. You need to have a certain kind of tagging algorithm on the data. So when you're doing that tagging algorithm, you can also create an architecture, impose an architecture that can't be changed by the user on what kinds of data sets they can have, and those data sets can be made transparent as inputs into the algorithm. And you need to have that as a separate product that works with the algorithm. And every Western society is going to have to do it. And by the way, so that's the politically kind of progressive version. Let me give you the right-wing battlefield position. I don't care about this. The reason you care about this, if you don't care about civil liberties, is because that's the only way to know that you are controlling your human and SIGINT data, and it's not being exported to adversaries in your own organization. So if you want to say, as purely a matter of theory, your intel services want to do a special operation with your special services, and you want to make sure that every bit of that data is tagged and the algorithms that are feeding into it are not exposed, you will need the same architecture that civil libertarians want. Exactly.
And this right here is really, really important. So Karp's basic argument here is that from a progressive perspective, if you want to protect civil liberties and still be able to fight bad things that are happening, you need to be able to have an architecture of data that has the tagging of data to be able to fuel the algorithm in a way that's transparent. And then from the non-progressive way, from the sort of right-wing, all I care about is fighting people type of way, if you want to export any of that data, it still has to be done in a transparent way in order to not have this type of big brother regime that's looking down on the data to be able to say that that data is hurting other people. Because if you don't care at all about civil liberties, but you still want to be able to export data internally, if that data is misused or misconstrued within the context of your own organization, that's bad for the organization, which means the same architecture you need to protect the civil liberties, to have the granular access controls to protect data internally, is the exact same thing you need externally to protect that data, which is what the civil libertarians, progressive left type of people would care about in regards to being able to build a big data tech company that's having access to all of privatized data in order to fight larger threats that are existing. What Karp is speaking about is a philosophical divide from the left and the right coming together to agree in this kind of Venn diagram in the middle of how to deal with civil liberties protections for data, but also stopping bad things from happening. The divide is you can't stop bad things without violating data. Karp's like, no, you can have an architecture, if you have 5 to 6 years, and Palantir has 20 years, of building that architecture to protect the data, to not impose on people's civil liberties, and also stop bad things from happening. You can have both. And it's not easy to have both, but if you do have both, that's a very special thing to have.
exactly the same. And one of the most interesting things about running this business for 20 years is civil libertarians don't understand that they want the same architecture that spies and special operators want for a very different reason. They want to come home alive. That's how you come home alive.
Okay,
That's a big deal. And if you want to come home alive, you need to have the same type of architecture in order to be able to protect data, just like if you want to protect civil liberties in regards to exporting that data across the entire world on the battlefield. It's an important thing by Karp. This was a gem that we got from the interview. I think this was really important. Again, I can't believe I missed this interview 6 months ago, but I'm happy it popped up on my feed. And yeah, it's one of the things I wanted to react to. I think it's one of the unique competitive moats Palantir has in order to be able to sell their software to the world, especially to defense companies or to countries, and now with their FedStart product to defense companies, to be able to actually solve both of those issues. You need a common architecture that people that are super just like, I want to kill terrorists, could use to be able to protect data internally within their organization so that they come home alive and they have the ability to actually show that the data has not been misused, and to the broader part of the world that wants to make sure that people's data is not misused in a way that violates civil liberties. You also need that same architecture of data for the people that are super, conservative around making sure individual rights are not violated, even though you're trying to solve a larger problem. And terrorism is the best example for this. The idea that after 9/11, we could create fraud detection algorithms, the same that were used in PayPal, which is the whole concept Peter Thiel had for Palantir, but bringing them into the governmental sector and protecting people's data to make sure that the government was internally not overreaching on the data they had access to. That is, by the way, the only way you solve the government from becoming an overarching tyranny. Like, if you stop 9/11 from happening again, the government doesn't have the ability to violate people's civil liberties because they don't have the justification, the ends to justify the means of doing whatever they want. But in order to stop the 9/11 from happening again, you can't do the ends justifying the means internally just to stop a bad thing from happening, because then those people will revolt against you and you're going to have way too much power and you won't be able to use the data in the first place because people won't just give you the data. And so what Karp's talking to in a room in the Netherlands to a bunch of European officials is like, all of you guys that think that Europe's the only one that care about data privacy and protection and all of this civil liberty stuff, the United States has deeply cared about it as well, even though it seems like we don't care about it. And Palantir is one of the most unique companies in the world because we have put an emphasis on that ethical philosophy while building our tech products that very few tech companies end up doing because they're, concerned about monetizing users. And as a result of that, that's why Palantir has ultimately built something special in the defense space. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you guys think. Thank you guys so much for listening to this video. And yeah, I'm happy I got to react to this clip from Alex Karp. I'll see you guys in the next one.